I'm the Reverend Dr. Jenny McKay, veterinarian and minister in secular employment, environmentalist, activist, and self-confessed cat junkie. But believe it or not, I have never kissed a mummy in Corfu. Someone who has is my guest, Charlie Bell. So, Charlie, I think we need to hear more about this. Was it mummy with a small m or mummy with a large m?
Well, I think it's a slightly strange tradition in Corfu that it's a sort of east meets west island. So there's the mummified remains of one of the major saints on the island, and I suppose most British people, when they see a queue, join it, and that's essentially what happened. And I joined the queue and got to the front and realised, well, me and a bunch of sort of pretty elderly ladies were queuing up to kiss a mummy, and I thought, well, in for a penny, so there we are.
Right. And is this supposed to be something lucky that you do? Doesn't bring good fortune.
I think it was probably the Saint's Day, actually, a sense of Spiridon. But I wasn't quite sure exactly why there was the big procession that day. And unfortunately, my Greek is 0. And whilst I had a lot of approving looks from the people doing it alongside me, I wasn't really able to get much information about why St. Spiridon was being opened up that day for kissing. But there we are.
Right. Well, that is definitely a first. I have never come across that one before. So back to you, really. I'm very happy to be speaking to somebody who's got a career in the secular world as well as the church. There aren't so many of us.
No, quite.
So how did a career in medicine and clinical psychology lead you into the church?
Yeah, so no, you're right. I mean, I suppose I'm pleasantly surprised by the number of people who have secular careers that I've met, but I think that's partly self-selecting because I think we all meet each other. And also where I trained down at St Augustine's in Canterbury, or West Malling really, it's a kind of place where you see more of that kind of thing, but for lots of people they don't really meet many of us. And so I mean, I was aged, I think you have to be about age 5 when you decide to do medicine. But I'd decided to do medicine all the way through. That seemed like the thing I wanted to do. Got through to university and so on, and was, got a bit fed up with rote learning. So did some research to try and give myself a bit of a sort of few years out. Came back into it and thought, that's it. Ready for medicine, no problem. But there was this nagging, tiresome, annoying voice that kept saying, "Are you sure?" And in the end, I thought, right, I'm just going to chat to our vocations people, say, look, there's something funny here. Please tell me it ain't true. And here we are, sort of 5-6 years later.
Wow, that's amazing. But your parents, they were both churchgoers, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So, so my mum's still with us and goes to church on a sort of, not terribly frequently basis, but goes and would call herself certainly a churchgoer. My dad was so my dad died about 11-12 years ago now, but was a pretty frequent churchgoer, and we went as kids and the rest of it. I was brought up United Reformed actually, and we ended up going to the Church of England because I was a chorister down in Chichester, and so. Wonderful. Yeah, so it was great. And, that became kind of the norm. So I'm certainly not a cradle Anglican, if such a thing exists. But, so really it got to the stage where very unfortunately, the minister of the United Reform had said to my parents, look, if you're not coming to us every week, then I'm not too keen about baptizing my sister. And they said, well, our son's a chorister in Chichester. We've got to spread our time between the two. Anyway, that fell on rather deaf ears, and we ended up, unfortunately, for the United Reformed Church, but in a kind of one of the ways these things work, ended up going to the Anglican Church, and here we are.
Yeah, opened up new doors for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm just sitting here and I've got a copy, which the people who are listening won't be able to see, but I do have a copy of your book, Queer Holiness, which is a celebration of the gifts that LGBTQI people give to the church. So this is probably a big question, but what do you think are the main obstacles the Church of England faces in adopting a more open-minded attitude when it comes to diversity?
Yeah, it's a good question, but as you say, it's a tricksy one. I mean, we've been here for so long, in a sense. You know, this debate has gone on and on and on and on, in so much as it has been a debate. I mean, I think one of the things which I've covered a bit in the book and which I've thought about quite deeply is the sort of underlying cultural issues within the Church of England, which has made this an issue primarily rather than something about people. And so therefore everything has to fit within that cultural understanding. So we need to not say too much, or we want to not upset too many people, and so on. And the more and more you tell yourself this as an institution, the more and more you end up behaving that way. So I think we're in a sort of, I think we're in a slightly hopeful place at the moment, but I do think we have seen what happens when fear rather than honesty takes center stage. But I think there are lots of reasons behind that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, as you say, they probably try and take a line between two groups of people. And you can't please everybody, can you?
Yeah, exactly. And the trick is, of course, recognizing that there's not an equivalence between one's whole sense of identity being challenged and one's theology being challenged. And for years, there's been the sort of talk of the kind of gay lobby and the conservative lobby. And actually, that's a fundamentally dodgy way of understanding the situation. But that's what's become so normalized that it becomes very difficult to do anything other than try and pursue a middle way, which at the moment is basically don't ask, don't tell. So we're sort of in the US military at the turn of the century territory as the Church of England.
Yeah. But fortunately, we do seem to be making some progress, particularly in the last few weeks. And we've seen some very positive statements coming out from, for example, the Bishop of Oxford.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Bishop of Oxford, speaking from a place quite different to mine theologically in terms of which stable he comes out of. You know, he is himself, he describes himself as a conservative evangelical by background, and has really done some serious work at describing how and why he's got to the place he's got to. And I think that's absolutely key. I think bishops have been sort of I think it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, whether they've been forced into a position or whether they find themselves in that position. But they've been in a very difficult position and have felt very uncomfortable speaking out. And I think it's enormously helpful that the Bishop of Oxford has not only said, look, I'm in favour of same-sex marriage, and I think it's a matter of justice, amongst other things, but has also shown his working. I think that is absolutely key to making a way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully his thought process will help a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that you mentioned that the reaction to queer holiness can be divided into 3 groups, and one of those is a change in perspective. Yeah. And I was wondering, had you personally received any feedback from people who've absolutely changed their mind on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the change of mind has begun in many people's situations because they've faced cognitive dissonance. They've got friends or family, grandchildren perhaps, or aunts and uncles or whatever it is, that themselves are gay, and they've seen the good news that comes out of their relationships. They've seen the kind of positive fruits and things from them, which are sort of demonstrably true, and yet they're being told at the same time to that nothing good, that kind of to paraphrase the biblical passage, nothing good can come out of Nazareth. Can anything good come out of same-sex relationships? And they're looking at them and saying, yes, it can. And I guess what I've tried to do in the book is to sort of lay out some of the groundwork for why that might be the case and how we might engage with those questions. And for me, that's been the most sort of heartwarming stuff where people have said, actually, you've made connections between why we're seeing things and how we can engage with that theologically and biblically and everything else. And the only thing that still frustrates me and frustrated me slightly in the response to the Bishop of Oxford was seeing people misrepresenting what the Bishop of Oxford has been saying, and saying, it's just cowing to culture and so on. That's just simply not the case. And the most exciting conversations are when people realize and understand what you're saying and then engage with it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure you feel it has been part of the secular world that people just don't understand this sort of debate in the church, and it can be very, very off-putting to normal people.
And we talk about providing life in all its fullness, and that basically what we say is that being a member of the church, being part of the church, should be good news and should be something that, I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean any of those things necessarily, but it means that it's good news. It's more, you're going to have a more fulfilled, more wonderful life with the Lord. But people look in and say, really? And I think that's one of the big challenges. And at the moment, I haven't heard any really serious, convincing argument that I could ever use as a clergy person, saying to people outside the church, actually know this, because the current church teaching is not life-giving.
No. It's it's a very it's a very frustrating topic. I know. I try and encourage. I'm interacting with people who probably don't have a lot of faith, and it's very, very difficult to explain what's going on in the church. And I think, as you've done, you go out, you explain. And we're associated with inclusive churches as well.
Exactly. And that's part of it, isn't it? Talking about these things sensibly and seriously. And the thing that's depressed me a little bit is that people are already turned off the church in many ways by what they perceive our perspective to be. And then when they find out what our rules are and what our is in some places, they're even more turned off, and so you're almost having to you're giving them the reality, at which point you have to do a lot of rowing back and saying, yes, that might be a kind of institutional picture, but that's not what an awful lot of Christians, lay, ordained, whoever, would see to answer this kind of question. But I just think it's such an important missional thing that can't just then be put on the back burner and pushed down the road, to mix metaphors. We've got to grapple with this and get on with it, really.
Absolutely. Well, fingers crossed it'll move in that direction.
Yeah, quite.
So moving on to a slightly different area, what about this Qatari World Cup? Do you wish there'd been more proactive resistance against this tournament from the England camp?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty bad, and even in the last few days, there's been conversations or statements coming out of Qatari ministers and ambassadors, which have really not sounded very positive. Sort of describing homosexuality as an illness in the mind and things. And these are, this is not where we should be. No. I think it was a mistake, and I think Sepp Blatter has admitted the same, that it was a mistake to award the World Cup to Qatar. That's not to say that we should then not engage with countries where there are these differences in kind of policy and political perspective. But on the other hand, can we really, in all honesty, be sending fans and indeed players to countries where their lives are, and certainly their freedoms are at risk? If not in the context of the football, they would be if they went any other time. Yes. And for me, I think it's a really difficult place for us to find ourselves. And I guess, in a sense, that most of the concern initially about the World Cup being in Qatar was about the heat. Will we be able to play the games? Well, yes, okay, we'll move it to December. Well, that's fine. But actually, the underlying or the ultimate questions here are much more serious, I think. And I don't think we've given them the level of engagement we should have done.
No. And hopefully, if there's a future decision on somewhere to have one of these big sporting events, that will be taken into greater consideration.
Yeah, I would hope so, yeah.
So, Charlie, how do you like to relax? If I had to give you a couple of options, for example, Campari on a beach in Italy or cheap wine and pizza on the sofa with University Challenge.
It's a tricky one. I mean, I do like Italy. I do think it's a fantastic. Politically at the moment, it's in all kinds of trouble. But I've grown a great love of Southern Europe, and I do like Italy. And I have to say, I struggle when it rains here. Some people seem to find the October, November, December movement towards Christmas a great joy, whereas I think not only have I got to get all my clinics sorted, not only have I got to prepare for Christmas, but also it's raining again. So give me. I think in the summer in England, I'd be very happy on the sofa with pizza, but I think I'm afraid around the edges, give me an Italian beach any day.
I think when those clocks go back, it's very, very hard, isn't it?
Oh, it's awful. And
I try and convince myself it's summer really until the clocks go back, and then
this is it.
That's it.
I remember when I was younger, I left my clocks at the BST just in order to make myself feel a bit better. And I'm half Scots, so there's part of me that kind of feels like I should enjoy the dreich weather. I sort of look out the window and think, no, this is where we came from. But I'm afraid I just can't. I think I was born in the wrong latitude.
Oh, well, I definitely feel that. I love France. So
lovely,
I would like to be there. Never mind, we are where we are.
Exactly.
But you are in a very, very nice place. You do still live in Cambridge, don't you?
I live in London now, so
right.
So I still hold a role in Cambridge, but I live in South London, which is just easier for work, really.
Okay. I did my PhD at the vet school, so I was there for 4 years, and I loved it. Yeah. Very, very difficult place to leave, but I know you are involved with biochemistry teaching to medical undergraduates, and that's at Girton College, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So I've been at Girton for about 5 years now. But I sort of did that odd thing where in medicine, because I did my PhD in the middle of my medical degree, I sort of became a sort of academic whilst still finishing my medical training. So it's a strange old world, Cambridge, but it's very addictive. And Girton for me fulfills the kind of Cambridge experience whilst also being a kind of outward facing modern college that has a kind of drive and purpose beyond having nice dinners in candlelit settings. There's a real mission to Girton, which I really identify with.
Was that one of the first women's colleges as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was the first institution for the education of women to higher level beyond school in the country. And it was originally founded just outside of Cambridge, and it's now a little bit further outside of Cambridge than most of the colleges. Yeah. But I think we're 150. Well, we had our 150th anniversary, I think, 2 years ago. Okay. So extraordinarily until the late 40s, we were educating women, but the university wouldn't give them degrees. So Girton has really been right at the forefront of women's education for a long time, and has moved probably in the last, since men have joined the college, has continued that drive towards women's education, promoting women in the workplace, promoting women in education, but also other elements of diversity and so on, which has been really key. Girton's it's a serious place, and it's and our results are good as well. So we somehow managed to hold everything together.
That's fantastic. So I guess just meeting these younger people and hearing their views, that's another nice aspect to your work and your interests.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you were hinting at earlier, we meet people in our day jobs. I meet them amongst my students for whom the conversations over sexuality and things are just it's not even that it's something that people are affirming of. It's something that people are just sort of almost look at you in horror that you're having these discussions or conversations, and that's changed even since I was an undergraduate. I mean, my undergraduates are just in a completely different place, but But it is wonderful to have conversations with them, because what I think is kind of pretty progressive, they'll then challenge me and I'll think, my goodness, I'm a sort of fusty old conservative. So it's really quite helpful to have those conversations. And I just love the opportunity to do that really in the university setting.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really good. So I do know that you were at the 60th anniversary of the Jamaican independence celebrations at St. John the Divine in the summer. So how was that?
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, St. John the Divine's congregation has a large number of people who have been associated with the Windrush generation. So either themselves or family that had people that were either on the Windrush, but were actually often were people that were associated that kind of time of high immigration to the UK. And it's the whole sort of narrative of the parish is one of celebration, really celebrating the diversity in the community. Interestingly, when people come to our church, the sort of norm in many ways would be a kind of Barbados or Jamaican background, or West African perhaps. So, and actually, if you're not from those backgrounds, we've had a lot of folk from South America that have joined us recently. It's very interesting to kind of have a church from which the experience and the difficulties that people faced initially when coming to the church many years ago, they've, rather than kind of becoming angry or bitter or frustrated about that, have used those to ensure that the place is more and more hospitable, and they challenge us all the time. So yeah, it's great. And I mean, my goodness, a Caribbean party is something else.
I bet.
We have rum is flowing, the food is fantastic, the music is loud. It's a serious place, a serious party. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, it's great, that they've been able to turn around some of the awful experiences they've had into something positive.
Exactly. And I think we need to hold those experiences and sort of recognize what happened in many parishes where, even in what we now think of as kind of multicultural London, life was not easy for folk who were Black, who were coming into congregations like ours. There were issues of representation, there were issues of lack of friendliness, there was overt racism. But yeah, I mean, just the tribute to these guys who have, gone through all of that and have used it to make things better for next generations is just extraordinary, really. So
that is London at its best, really, in the multicultural sense, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, there's always more work to do, and and no parish should sit on its laurels, really. But we're aware of things going on in South London. We're aware of the rich history which we have, and I think every year we try to see what we can do to make things a bit better for communities in South London, not by kind of doing things to them, but because our church is so full of people from different communities, trying to listen to them, trying to engage with them, trying to allow them to actually lead in many ways on how we as a church respond to, local challenges, national challenges, and so on.
Have you had quite a few Ukrainian refugees as well?
We haven't had that many in our area of London, and I think that's just because there are certain parts of London where there have been more, and there are certain areas where there have been fewer. So we've done various fundraising events and so on in order to try to play our part in doing that. And I know that there's a large number in Lewisham, for example, that's just down the road. So we've engaged with the kind of national church and local diocese on that. But we haven't actually had a very large stream of Ukrainian refugees in Kennington, which is presumably just based on where there is housing and the rest of it. Yeah.
Yes. I think they're spread out to quite a number of the big cities, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have an extremely busy life.
Yes.
What's next on the horizon for you, Charlie?
It's an excellent question. I wish I knew the answer. I always say I've never planned anything before, so I don't intend to start now. I mean, I'm coming to the end of medical training in the next couple of years, which I'm delighted by. I'm sure it's the same in vet meds. You just never seem to finish training. And so I'm delighted about that. And we'll see what that leads to. My interest really is in the forensic end of psychiatry. So I'd hope to kind of get a forensic consultant job I don't feel called to be full-time in the church, even if the church was really hospitable to LGBT people, which it isn't. But if it was, even if it was, I don't think that that's where I am at this point in time. But who knows? I'd like to go and do something useful. That's the key.
Well, you have a great gift, haven't you? You've done such a long training in medicine, and not to use that would be such a shame.
Exactly, and that's what the bishop who put me forward, the Bishop of Ely. I remember one of our early conversations, that was one very clear thing that we discussed between us, which was, there is a serious amount of medical training that's gone on here. Let's not lay that aside just yet. And I think that's the right decision.
Excellent. Well, it's been really, really wonderful to listen to your answers to my delving questions. And I shall look forward maybe at some time in the future to go to Corfu and find one of these mummies myself.
Exactly.
Okay, Charlie, thank you very, very much.
Great, thank you.
All the best.
Thanks.